I went to Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. I didn't get in a fight because it wasn't, but whatever it was, I won. We'll leave it at that. But my neck's all cut up, and all day long. I don't know how often you've been down on the floor with your asthma and stuff, but I don't mind being down there. But sometimes it gets moving around and whatnot.
Sure.
But then when Manson hit the stage, these three idiots just started pushing forward. They were big guys. One was bigger than me. The other two were around my size. And there's just a bunch of girls down there. And I'm not going to pretend like there's a bunch of girls at a Marilyn Manson Rob Zombie show. But there was enough that I was just kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? But anyway, when there's that many people all pushing, it's kind of hard to get your feet and be in a comfortable position.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So, I just kind of moved the guy so I could be comfortable.
Yeah.
And he comes up behind me and he doesn't hit me, but he tries to put me in like a headlock, but in the process ends up like reaching around and scratching me. I didn't even realize it at the time. It wasn't until the next day. But anyway, I have to walk around and work all day long today. Like, you got a hickey on your neck? No, I got in a fight at a Marilyn Manson concert. And I don't know what's more embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, I didn't watch Brian Banks.
Oh, sweet. Welcome to Everyone's a Critic movie review podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Zerl. With me, as always, is professional film critic Sean Patrick. Visit us at IHateCritics.net, everyone'sacriticpodcast.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is CriticsPod. There you can check out our trailers, Sean's reviews. The podcast is there. You posed an interesting question on the podcast website or Facebook page earlier this week that I just noticed it tonight. It was got some good responses too, I thought.
Yeah, that was interesting. Basically, it started with a post on Nathan Raymond's page. He was talking about listening to bad movie podcasts. There's one specifically that focus on movies that are universally thought of as bad. And he asked the question about how do you feel when your favorite podcast is talking about a movie that you love in the context of it not being good. And that got me thinking, like, oftentimes we'll mention the movies that we're going to talk about, and it's going to be and we don't talk about bad movies specifically.
Especially not for the on purpose, to, like, let's just have fun shitting on this movie.
Yeah, we don't. Our approach is different, not better, but just different. I posed the question on our page: when you hear that we're going to talk about a movie that you love, does it make you more interested in listening or less interested in listening? And it's basically just how do you feel about? Do you get really precious about the movies that you care about? And I thought there were some really interesting responses. One of them was rather lengthy, which and really thoughtful, which I thought was really cool. Which,
in his response, is kind of where I'm at too, especially when we started the podcast. I came from reviewing music and CDs and albums and whatnot, and it was hard for me to not be negative, or not be negative. It was hard for me to be negative because I like what I like. I'm not into certain things. That's not fair for me to say that's bad because I'm not into that genre of music. Now, it's different for movies, I think, especially as a critic. It's a little different than as a fan doing it, like what I was. But it still was very hard. Even now, sometimes it's hard. That's why I'm always defending Adam Sandler. I'm not a fan of his movies, but it's just like, okay, let's be a little nicer. But so I totally can relate to that. But yeah, it'll always be the thing I struggle with most whenever it comes to giving my opinion. That's why when you hear me badmouth a movie, it's usually a movie everybody likes, Magnolia or something like that. It's never The Room or, But yeah, that was a fun little conversation. We had 3 or 4 responses on that too.
Yeah, it was really neat. I love it when everybody's getting interested and involved. That's really cool. I just got to come up with better questions.
Yeah, me too. Just so hard to be available all the time with my job. Trailers this week. We got Dolemite Is My Name.
Yeah, and this is interesting because I've heard about this movie for a long time. Yes.
Really?
Yeah, this has been in the planning for a good long while now to have Eddie Murphy play Dolemite. How familiar are you, by the way, with the character of Dolemite?
I'm not.
And all. I just know him from he's big, in the blaxploitation genre, and he was a popular comedic figure of the time in the early 1970s. Because he was one of the filthiest comedians in history, so I kind of knew him from that, and I heard about the Eddie Murphy playing him, and I thought that's perfect, that's great. That was like 2-3 years ago when they first started talking about this movie, and now since then we've had the idea of this. The Mr. Rogers movie came up, and there was another one recently where like, okay, you're just kind of giving me exactly what I asked for, and now I'm going, I don't know if that's really what I want anymore. And this is like, yeah, Eddie Murphy, I thought he was kind of perfect for this. Now it just looks like he's playing a really outsized version of Eddie Murphy, and I'm not as interested as I was.
I wonder. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. Granted, no, I'm not. I recognize the name, but I don't know anything about the character and whatnot. But you say that an outsized version of Eddie Murphy, I think that's what makes me kind of more excited about it. I don't think Tom Hanks is playing a version of Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers. I do think there's probably onto something there, which could make it kind of genius. James Franco playing kind of James Franco when he was doing what's his name from The Room, Tommy Wiseau. I don't know, and it doesn't hurt that I just saw Seinfeld's thing with Eddie Murphy, the comedians in cars getting coffee, that I thought was just fantastic. And you just forget how amazing Eddie Murphy was. Or I suppose probably still is, but just hasn't really shown it to everybody else in a while. So I don't know. I'm on board. I didn't know about it in the works. And it's nice to see him doing something a little less kid-friendly. I know he's done some good things here and there, Dreamgirls and whatnot, but it's been a while. And
yeah, it has. Like the last thing he did was a movie called Mr. Church, which nobody saw. They thought was going to be an Academy Award contender. At least they made it with that intent, and it went completely unnoticed to the point where I didn't even get a screener of it, so I didn't even bother watching it. And that was the last thing he did. The other news about him is I think he signed a deal to actually do stand-up again.
Yeah, and he mentioned it on the Seinfeld thing that he was going to do it. And I don't know, just kind of seeing that. I mean, he's one of those guys that's put on that pedestal of comedy that, whether he deserves it or not, I don't know. He definitely owned a few years of the 80s. And because of that, you hear Chappelle and Chris Rock and Kevin Hart and even white comedians putting him as one of the guys for their childhood. And how do you live up to that? And I think that's something he's struggled with for probably 2 decades now, maybe longer.
I imagine he's still struggling with it, and he's going to struggle with it when he does it. This is not the 80s anymore. This is a very, very different time. You can't do a bit where you're having, Mr. T breaking somebody's dick off in his ass. It's not a bit you can do anymore and expect to get laughs.
Right, but I think with most comedians, you've seen them kind of change their act as they go, and still, I still think Chris Rock's every bit as funny as he's always been. I think,
but Chris Rock has also evolved too.
Well, right, and we don't know that Eddie Murphy hasn't, because he hasn't done anything.
Yeah,
and that I think he has. I mean,
based off the Seinfeld interview, you think he's got
that, and he did he won some Mark Twain award, and he did a little 5-minute. I wouldn't call it a stand-up routine, but it was just phenomenal. It was flat out perfect. And it's just like, okay, he still has it if he wants. I think the issue he runs into is you got to warm up. You got to practice this stuff. And with cell phones, there is that risk. I mean, Chappelle went through it where all of a sudden stuff shows up and you're not that good. That's, I don't know, when you're as good as Eddie Murphy is. That's why Seinfeld's been doing the same act for 30 years.
That he's a coward. That too.
Well, but even he'll tell you he doesn't like to be introduced as like the greatest stand-up of all time, because where do you go from there? And it's, I don't know. I'm just, the fact that Eddie Murphy's even back is exciting to me. Whether it lasts or not, who knows? I mean, he's been back so many times, it's not even funny.
I was like, I was kind of down on the idea just because of what I just said before, but I kind of got excited about the idea because on the Dollop recently, Dave Anthony was talking about Eddie Murphy coming back and how excited he is, and knowing that a guy like Dave Anthony is excited to see him kind of makes me a little bit more interested and excited.
Yeah.
And he wasn't being a dick; he was actually being serious.
Well, no, I heard Anthony Jeselnik and Joe Rogan on their podcast talking about how excited they were for comeback, and it's just, he kind of reached that iconic status, and similar to Steve Martin in some ways, that there's just a lot of crap out there with his name on it since probably the early 90s.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of bad stuff out there.
But it's a big old house he lives in, or 4 or 5 of them. All right, big old pile of crap. Let's go. We got a lot of movies. Maybe they're good. I saw one of them. We'll start with the one I saw because it damn near won the weekend. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah, this is produced and partially written by Guillermo del Toro, along with a couple of the guys who did a couple of the different Saw movies. And I don't know the name of the director off the top of my head, but a group of teenagers in 1968 go into this old house on Halloween. They find a book that is a part of a local legend. A woman who was kept in a basement was reading scary stories to children. The children who heard the stories were then killed. They were killed essentially in the fashion of the story that they were told. And the idea here is that they find her book, they read her book, and then as they do that, they call forth her spirit, and she begins writing new stories starring this group of teenagers. And each time a story is written about one of the kids, they end up enacting that story and dying. This is a PG-13 horror movie, which interesting approach, and they still find ways to make it look cool. There are some really neat looking monsters in this movie. I really dug the scarecrow monster.
Yeah,
looked a lot like, reminded me a lot of Jason, I guess, a little bit in look.
Yeah, I was gonna say it kind of had that Rob Zombie Halloween, Michael Myers, but yeah, between those two, yeah, definitely.
The mask for sure.
Right.
And I thought the way that they played out that story was really creepy and effective. There's a scene late with this monster that appears everywhere you look. So you look one way and it's there, and then you look another way and it's there. And that was a neat looking monster. I think they kind of hedge their bets on that monster and another monster because they want to be sure to have a sequel, as they tease at the end. So there's elements of it that are, I don't want to say cheats, but they're kind of. I don't know how I feel about this movie, honestly. There's things that I like about it. Like, I like the lead actress. I think she's really really effective, and the lead actor is pretty good too. Other stuff I could have done without. And this movie is definitely not a movie I would consider essential in any way.
No,
it's not iconic. It doesn't change the horror genre or anything. It's just It's just kind of a TV show. Like, it kind of reminded me of a Netflix TV show for teenagers.
Maybe. I mean, I when you say there's stuff I like about it, I would say there's nothing I really dislike about it. There's some really cool stuff, and then it just kind of exists at other points, and that's kind of where it is for me. I guess I don't want to call it a kid's but it's kind of on that blockbuster horror level, but a little bit made for a younger audience, but not too young, as I found out. Here's the deal. My wife read this book as a kid, or whatever. I don't even know if it's based on the book. I never read it. My daughter read the book and was like all excited to go see it. And we were torn between this and Dora, and I was like, let's just go see Dora. It looks like a fun Jumanji movie. My son was like, let's go see Dora. My daughter was like, let's go see Dora. My wife would not go see Dora. It was this or we go home. And the kids at this point went from, my daughter was excited to go see it. Uh-huh. And then by the time we got there, she's like, I really don't want to watch this. My son did not want to go to this. He was petrified the whole time. He was in my lap, covering his eyes and his ears. As you got into it, you kind of, I don't know. They say it's like when you put a crab in boiling water. If you start it cold and it gets warm, you're just you're adjusting with the water. It's kind of like that. Once he started to warm up to it, it still scared him, but not to the level of early on. But that made it more effective for me. It was kind of fun because it's not that. I mean, there's definitely moments that you're just like, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
Especially for a 7-year-old. But it's also not, Saw or even It for that matter. Although the trailer for It really fucked him up. He knows too much about It with never seeing it, just kind of sees YouTube videos via Minecraft or whatever the hell, or Roblox, whatever it is. They reenact it, and he knows the whole damn story.
Oh, wow.
But it was just kind of fun, because it is childish. It is still, I don't want to call it a kid's movie, but it's childish enough that you're not going to torture them, I don't think. Maybe Josh would disagree. He went through the poltergeist as a young child. So. But it kind of made it more fun for me. But I agree with you. It doesn't change anything. It's not groundbreaking, but I would definitely put it on the above average level, but not, it's not game like Happy Death Day. There was something new there.
Yeah.
This is just kind of a better made run-of-the-mill horror movie, I guess.
Yeah, I guess if you wanted to categorize it as to whether or not I recommend you see it, you'd be fine waiting to see this on DVD and have the same experience that we had. Or Netflix, for that matter. This is not a movie I think anybody needs to rush out and see immediately. It's probably better on home video because I found this movie to have a pace that was leaden. I was bored a couple times, just going, okay, all right, I get it. I get the story. Let's start writing. Start writing.
I do think I get what you're saying. I mean, like I said, I went with my family, so yeah. I think singing it with a group of people it makes it a better experience. So you don't got to go alone to the theater. But I think if you are in a crowded theater, which apparently it did pretty good, or you have a group of friends, a theater experience would be fun for this movie. I mean, to me, it's kind of like what, I guess what the fast movies are for horror movies. It's just a smaller, you don't necessarily need to be in the theater for a horror movie like you do an action movie to appreciate the effects and whatnot. But at the same time, I think the audience, if you're with the right audience, it could raise the level, but if you're also with the dead audience, it could be boring as hell, like you said. So,
I think one of the problems with this movie is Guillermo del Toro. I think him putting his name on something right now that isn't something groundbreaking or special, it can hurt the movie. I think when he puts his name on it and does a little bit of the writing, you kind of go, okay, well, Guillermo del Toro did this.
Shape of Water. Let's see what he's got.
Yeah, let's. This is the Pan's Labyrinth guy. Let's see what he's got here and what he's going to do. This is going to be amazing, right? And then when it comes out like kind of okay or passable or entertaining, you're like, oh, well, all right.
I would agree with that, except for the fact that he didn't direct it.
Right.
Because there's been so much bullshit that was his name as producer and on it. Yes, he wrote part of it, so that is a little different. But he's produced a lot of bad horror movies.
Very true.
So, I mean, and I think only you and I and people that are really into him and that kind of, and know enough about him would really care about that. But I know what you're saying. But at the same time, I think he also played a role of it being as scary as it was, because some of those monsters. I mean, there were some good scares in there. Yeah,
I imagine he had his fingers on that that monster, the appears everywhere monster.
Oh, yeah. I thought every monster was well done, but yeah, they were all some unique ones, especially one that appeared everywhere.
I did like the story about the toe. I thought that was the one that really resonated with me as one you would hear about at a campfire for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I still haven't read the book, and I don't know what the book has to do with this other than the name. Maybe nothing. I don't know.
I didn't even realize it was a book. I didn't know it was famous.
I don't realize a lot of that. I'm working today. I'm an accountant. I'm in my accounting office with two people outside of it, and I'm listening to one tell the other about her son dabbling with Ouija boards, and the other one goes, "Oh, you need to be careful because you can't. If you got to be sure to get them out the right way. If you the spirits that they bring into the house." And these are like 56-year-old women, and I'm just sitting here going, "Shut the fuck up." I live in a quote-unquote haunted house that people like you believe is haunted.
Oh my god! I love just the rich inner lives of these people.
And I have some of my officers that I'm supposed to be working with, and all I want to do is tell them to shut the fuck up.
You know what? Those people are constantly entertained by life, aren't they?
But those people are also the reason movies that you hate exist. Movies that you hate, movies that I don't see. So,
like the next movie that we talk about.
Oh, the dog movie? Or are you all feel that way about all of them? I was just going to go down the list of success.
Oh, if you will. The list of success would probably lead us to an actually
Dora.
Good movie.
Dora?
Yeah, actually.
Jumanji good?
So weird. Not that good. Let's dial it back.
Ballpark?
Yeah, maybe. Because this has Eugenio Derbez, so automatically it starts off at a level of an F and has to build from there.
Infield single?
Because he is playing in human form, Eugenio Derbez. I really... Gerard Butler and Adam Sandler have always been kind of on a level of things I dislike on an intense level. Eugenio Derbez is right there with, just right underneath that Gerard Butler level of just how much I hate something.
I can't wait for the next Fallen movie when all three of them are in it.
I honestly have probably softened on Sandler a great deal just because I don't see him anymore, so he's probably actually way down below these two. But Dora, at least he's not the star of Dora. Young lady Monir, I forgot her first name, but she's a wonderful young actress.
Isabella?
Isabella Monir, who is a wonderful young actress who plays Dora. And this is the creative team behind Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Get 'Em to the Greek and the Muppet movies. So they really picked a smart creative team. Nicholas Stoller and James Bowman wrote and directed this movie. And that's a really clever choice. They do what they do right off the bat is take you into this little fantasy where young Dora actually imagines herself as a live-action young Dora. So you get to see the talking backpack and the map, and her and Diego are riding around a little car, and they're talking to the audience, and they're asking the audience if they know where Swiper is, and all the stuff you remember from the TV show.
Amazing.
So that's a really clever way to start the Dora movie, and then reality comes in. Your mom and dad come in and say, "What are you kids doing?" And then then you realize they're just playing, and we start into an actual movie from there. Dora and Diego grow up. Dora grows up in the jungle. Diego leaves when he's about 8 or 9. He's a little bit older than Dora, and he goes to live in the city. And 10 years later, they're reunited. They're in high school, and Dora has to go to a high school in America while her parents are chasing down the lost city of gold because they think it's too dangerous for her. She's demonstrated she's a little irresponsible. She'll go chasing after clues at the risk of her own well-being.
Right.
So they send her to go to high school, and she obviously doesn't fit. And we get a little bit of fish out of water time, but that doesn't last very long because immediately she gets kidnapped and taken back to the jungle to try and find her parents. So these bad guys want to track down the lost city of gold. And she's kidnapped along with Diego and 2 other high schoolers and this is a really fun group of kids. I really liked all 4 of these characters. They've all got very distinct personalities. They work well together. They seem to like each other eventually. You know, there's tension first of all, but they would come to like each other, and I really enjoyed their presence. And then they get united with Alejandro, played by Eugenio Derbez, who does his thing where he yells and screams and flails about, and just his type of super irritating comedy. But thankfully, he doesn't get in the way very often, which is nice. So he can't ruin the movie. Eventually, of course, they're going to arrive at the lost city of gold. And one of the really nice things about this, the parents are played by Michael Pena and Eva Longoria. And I want to see a sitcom with Eva Longoria and Michael Pena. They are wonderful together as Dora's parents. They've got a very funny chemistry. Michael Pena is one of the most underrated comic actors working today. If you saw Ant-Man, you know what I'm talking about. And here he's wonderful, and he seems to have rubbed off on Eva Longoria. He really loosens her up, and she's having as much fun as he is. And they're a very ethical duo. They're not treasure hunters. They're searching to discover something as opposed to take something. So there's a nice thing there. The final act, and I don't think this is spoiling anything completely. It's just almost a shot-for-shot reenactment, PG reenactment of. Everybody's gonna get mad at me again for bringing it up. It's Last Crusade again. They just reenact Last Crusade, and guess what? They do it better. Sorry. I'm kidding. I actually like the ending of Last Crusade.
Everybody just turned off because you're shitting on a movie they love. Again.
Why is he talking about Last Crusade again?
Every episode since the game. It's a drinking game, folks. Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't get to see it. I was totally down to see it just by the way the weekend worked out. But the trailer I thought was really good. I'm sure a lot of what was in the trailer is that opening early on stuff where she's going through security with her backpack, which, that alone, you didn't get to show it to me. I'm going to laugh.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just seems pretty clever, and sounds like they did a good job of making it fun. And I compared to Jumanji just because a movie that existed that people liked okay or disliked, if you're Josh, and they went and they really raised the bar on it, and this one looked like it was going to be fun, and that's kind of what I mean when I compare it to Jumanji, I guess.
Yeah.
It looked like it was going to be a ton of fun, and I'm sure at some point I'll see it, and I mean, it sounds like everything you said is what I expected, so.
I mean, for a movie that's based off of Dora the Explorer, what could you possibly want out of it other than this?
Is $17 million a bad
It's not a
weekend?
Great opening. This is a movie, I think they spent
50.
50?
But then they've been all over, I'm sure, the kids' stations. I mean, I suppose once was it Nickelodeon that it was originally on?
I think so, yeah.
I'm sure advertising's free there.
Yeah.
But they put it out there dollars wise, so I'm sure there's another $20 million in advertising.
But I imagine they'll do better in international markets with this one, especially I think Mexico and South America are probably going to be all over this one because Eugenio Derbez is one of the biggest stars in Mexico. Has been for a very long time, and then of course the South American setting does help as well. How that'll play other foreign markets, I don't know, but they're going to need a lot of help to get to make the amount of profit that they wanted on it for sure.
I do think it's going to do well streaming later on when it finally comes out there.
Yeah, it is the kind of movie that you can put on for the kids and have it basically act as a babysitter.
It's a good babysitter.
Yeah.
The Art of Racing in the Rain.
Hey, Bob, guess what? That title?
Yeah.
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for life, you see. The Art of Racing in the Rain is yet another bad dog movie. The idea here is that one day Denny is a race car driver, and he's driving home for a race, and he is compelled to pull off this side road, this dirt road, where he sees a sign that says "Free Puppies," and he's drawn to pick this one specific puppy and take it home and make it his and raise him as Enzo, named after, of course, Enzo Ferrari, his favorite type of race car. They're inseparable. They're best friends. The dog even learns to love racing, and we learned that because the dog is voiced by Kevin Costner, from puppy to throughout his entire life. Eventually, Denny meets a girl, and he kind of interrupts their idyllic time together. And the dog is very suspicious of the girl, But eventually,
and you know that because Kevin Costner tells you.
Yes, exactly. The dog is explaining this consistently throughout his jealousy and mistrust, and eventual coming to love the woman as she becomes pregnant and has a baby, and they become more of a family.
And it's just super laid back Costner too, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting.
Okay.
Costner's actually the best part of this movie.
Well, I'm not surprised.
I kind of was, because I thought the trailer made it look kind of silly that they chose Kevin Costner for this, but he actually brings this like world weary, older gravitas to him. That like maybe this is an old soul that's been put into this dog for some time, and I thought that was in the trailer it played terribly, but here it plays pretty well. Everything else doesn't work because this movie is just bombing you with cliche after cliche after cliche. So the dog can smell cancer, and of course the dog is going to be put in a dangerous situation and have to escape. And the movie. The last thing a movie like this needs is a villain, and they have an actual villain in this movie, played by, oh gosh, I can't remember the actor's name, but he's Amanda Seyfried's father, the father-in-law. He hates Denny for being a race car driver and being unable to provide for his daughter, and in the final act, they have him just become this absolute, just this evil mustache-twirling villain of the movie, and it's just so
Gary Cole?
stupid. No, that's not. No, it's not Gary Cole.
Oh, he'd be the perfect villain.
No, Gary Cole's his buddy and his boss at the race car school. But yeah, it's just the last thing this movie needs is a villain. You don't need a villain in this movie. It's a slice of life picture about a dog going through life, loving racing, and maybe somebody gets sick and gets better or doesn't get better. Whatever, but you don't need to add a villain to this story. It's just such a horrible, and it's a lazy piece of writing on top of everything, because they use this guy to drive the entire plot of the third act.
Martin Donovan?
Yeah, Martin Donovan. Yeah, that's who it is. They use him to drive.
Casting too.
They use him to drive the entirety of the third act, and if he's not evil, there is no third act, and that's just the laziest kind of writing that you could do here. There are so many. There are other options that you have with these actors. You could do something much more interesting and thoughtful, but they choose to just. This is the worst possible cliche. We're going to go to a courtroom scene, and how they make that happen. They have the dog dream of a courtroom scene of what he thinks happened in there. So it's weird and awkward, and it's not meant to be funny. It's basically playing out logically what likely happened in the courtroom, and so it's just so dumb. I'm glad they didn't find a way to get the dog into the courtroom. I mean, that would have been even sillier, but still. I hate this movie, and it's really unfortunate because Costner's voice work is actually really strong.
The art of racing in the rain. Explain the metaphor to the listeners at home, please.
Well, you see...
See, someone used a metaphor for me today that I want to share. I mean, all I've been doing is telling stories from my day. But, and this could seem insensitive, and this doesn't mean to be, but they said that 2019 is fucking them in the ass. And I tried to tell them that, look, yes, it's painful, but there's always pleasure in that, too. So look at the good points of your year. And eventually we'll end. Life's dick will get sore.
I mean, that's a big assumption that anal is a bad thing.
I mean, there's always a little pleasure and pain. That's the best part. So you gotta. And Kevin Costner, never mind. The kitchen.
The kitchen. You want to talk about disappointments? This movie is a massive disappointment. Based off of a comic book novel. What do you call those? I can't. Graphic novel. That's it. The idea here is that three women in late 1970s New York in Hell's Kitchen are their husbands go to jail. They're mobsters, and the women are left behind to take care of everything. And the new head of the mob, this guy who's not even on the IMDb page or the wiki page for this movie, so I couldn't even credit him if I wanted to. He gets named the new head of the Irish mob in Hell's Kitchen, and he decides that he's not going to support them as much as they expected to be supported. So they're left with very little to get by on. So they decide to look into why the Irish mob in Hell's Kitchen isn't taking in as much money. And it turns out they're not doing the protection that they promised. So they start, these three women, with a little bit of help from a couple of thugs, start actually doing protection in the neighborhood, and they start getting paid for it. And they're taking in all this money, and eventually the Irish mobster is going to figure out what's going on, and there's going to be a violent conflict. And the conflict comes a lot earlier than you would expect it to, and that character is gone just like that in a fashion that was surprising and grotesque, but not particularly interesting. They introduced this character played by Domhnall Gleeson, who has a previous relationship with Elizabeth Moss's character in the movie. I should say Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss are the stars here. Melissa McCarthy is the mom. Tiffany Haddish is a black woman trying to live in an Irish neighborhood. And Elizabeth Moss was repeatedly abused by her husband, and she doesn't miss him now that he's in jail. So the three of them are the ones who are running down this protection.
Not to mention three actresses I'm usually excited about seeing in movies.
Yeah.
So this is really a bummer.
The whole movie is a bit of a bummer. It's really dark in terms of just the picture is really dark. Like the cinematography is brutal at times, where you're just kind of staring at this gloomy black dreck, like you're watching the movie through a puddle at times. That's really unfortunate. The shifts in the relationships between the women aren't particularly believable or well set up. They just sort of happen, and you're like, what, who decided what now happened? Yeah, this is not a good movie.
Who's at fault? Director, writer?
I think, yeah, Andrea Berloff is the writer-director here, and I think what the graphic novel, from what I've read, kind of goes for a darkly comic vibe, and she's not really getting that. She's kind of playing everything straight and really. I can't put any thoughts into what she was thinking in this, but she seems to have allowed Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, and Elizabeth Moss to kind of create their own characters in a way, or play them as they like to play them. So they're each playing a beat that is offbeat to the rest of the cast, and that makes it very difficult to put a tone together. So I guess everybody's kind of at fault in a way, because they should have each recognized that they were doing that and maybe tried to be more cohesive. Josh would hate this movie. It's got one of those things where you've got people who are doing these horrifically terrible things, and you're supposed to like them. And that didn't work well with me either. But
Right.
specifically the stuff that Elizabeth Moss and Domhnall Gleeson are into, and then the movie asks you to see them as this grand romance. It's like, really? Their biggest bonding moment is him teaching her how to cut up a body, and it's not even played for laughs. It's not even played for that like uncomfortable, awkward humor. It's sort of matter of fact.
God, Tarantino can't direct everything, guys. That's a bummer.
Yeah,
I figured when it dropped down to number 7 this week, only making $5 million with that cast.
That weird release. I mean, they released the trailers for these very, very early on. There was a lot of buzz about this movie very quickly, and then they just let it die.
Yeah, just a bummer. Bring the Soul.
Bring the Soul, BTS. Be sure to put this in the metadata on the on the website when you post this, because we'll get huge downloads just for mentioning them. BTS is the most popular band in the world, in case you didn't know. They are kind of a boy band, but there's something a little bit more about them, I guess.
Oh, okay. There's like 15 kids in it or something like that.
It's 7. Yeah, there's 7 of
Whatever.
them. They all have distinct personalities, but what's kind of weirdly fascinating about them is they're just extraordinarily smart. Like they're like highly educated. Each one of them can speak pretty much any language. All their music is in Chinese. Korean. Sorry, all their music is in Korean. They sing and rap and perform in Korean, and yet everybody gets the message. So it's pretty impressive. But their songwriting is inspired by like psychiatrists and psychologists and philosophers. That's where they're drawing their lyrical influence from. But then their music influence is basically like NSYNC, Kanye, Drake, all this mixture of stuff. Justin Timberlake. So it's kind of odd. I think if you heard this in English, you'd be like, what? You'd just kind of be puzzling over how they're doing it. I think being in Korean kind of makes it sound almost actually more like a boy band and something you could almost think you could dismiss. But it's hard to dismiss them. They're incredibly popular and they're incredibly smart, and they demonstrate that. But they're also extraordinarily compassionate, very sweet. They seem to care deeply about what they do. There's no artifice to them. The extraordinary level of earnestness is, for me as a Gen Xer, almost repellent. I don't know quite how to take anybody who is this genuine. And I know a couple millennials who are kind of like this, who are very, very straightforward, always, heart in the sleeve, kind of honest with you. And I'm always just kind of it's always kind of hard for me to make that connection with them. And so I was kind of fascinated by this. And I kind of get where these guys are connecting with people.
It's interesting. I didn't even think of that band being what this documentary is about. Or that group, or whatever.
Interestingly enough, BTS does not stand for Bring the Soul.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it stands for. It's something in Korean, but...
Yeah, I mean, I knew about them, and then I think they were on Saturday Night Live at one point.
It's possible, yeah.
But I've never heard anything. I mean, obviously, I'm not into boy bands, so it's just not worth my time. We know how good they are. I'm never going to love the music. May like the message, but
yeah, I mean, the message is all about love yourself, and it's about they actually do songs about self-care and be kind to yourself. And I think a lot of people have kind of dismissed them as this. Oh, they're coming from the perspective of the everybody gets a trophy crowd, the self-esteem crowd, and it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I know that we kind of grew up in it with people telling us, hey, life's going to take a big dump on you, and you need to be ready for it. Well, why don't we raise a generation and allow them to actually have life experiences and believe in themselves, and maybe they don't have to have life take a giant dump on them. Maybe they can actually be optimistic.
Well, let's not pretend like everybody gets a trophy crowd that works. I mean, my son was in wrestling. I think I've told the story before, and he lost every time, and he got this giant ass trophy after every match, and he hated it because it reminded him of getting his ass kicked every time. So I mean, it's not like you're sheltering anybody from anything. It's a reminder, if nothing else. So I don't know.
I'm saying I don't see anything wrong with allowing children to develop a healthy self-esteem.
Right. It's all just
because I didn't
bullshit.
Develop a healthy self-esteem.
Well, yeah, I mean, our musical heroes killed themselves, so...
It's true. Oh, it's so true.
Good old Gen X.
But you know what? We're entitled to our cynicism and our irony and whatnot. I mean, we grew up with parents who were hippies in the 60s and whatnot, and they were going to change the world. Then they got a little bit of cocaine, and they're like, fuck that, give me money. That's my impression of the 60s. What? Cocaine? Give me money!
I mean, it's definitely true. I mean, obviously we're generalizing,
right.
But it's definitely an element of that.
I mean, cocaine and a desire for money is the only thing that explains Reagan. It's the only way.
Well, yeah. I mean, the money is just... Money sucks.
It's the worst.
It's so hard being Gen X and moving on from this. Obviously, this is somehow in the title. I don't know what, but it'll be in there. The Farewell finally came here.
This is awesome. What a phenomenal movie. Written and directed by Lulu Wang and based on her own experience, a story that she actually told on NPR about her family. And this is it's very unique and very cultural. It's a very different kind of culture in China. The idea here is that her grandmother, Nene, has cancer, and she doesn't know it. She's the policy for China, or I guess I don't know if it's familial or what, how they decide how they do this, but I guess as a culture, they just decide that if somebody has a disease that is killing them, their policy is to tell the family, but not to tell the person who actually has it. And the idea is if you tell them, and there are some studies that actually back this up, if you tell a person who's dying that they're dying, they start to die faster because they're aware of it. So the policy here is don't tell her, and she'll go on living her life as normal. And so she has a family that is her sons. One lives in Japan and the other one lives in America, and that's the one who has a daughter played by Awkwafina, who has always loved her grandmother. They're very close. They talk every day, but she's got a westernized view of the world. Where in our country, the thing is, if you've got cancer, they're going to tell you, and you're going to try to figure out how to fight it that way. It's almost illegal in this country not to tell somebody that they're dying. Like, that's the level.
It might actually be.
It might actually be, honestly. I think that comes up in the movie too. So she finds out that her grandmother is dying, and then she finds out that they're not going to tell her. They're going back to China, and they specifically don't want her to go because they're afraid that her being so sad and her being so honest and close with her grandmother that she's just going to break down and tell her. Well, she throws the last few cents that she has into a ticket and goes to China. The pretense is that everybody's going there for the wedding of her cousin. But the actual thing is they're all going there to say goodbye to Nene. And it's really exceptional in every way. The performances are spot on. Awkwafina is incredible. You think of her style as being very irreverent, very R-rated. If you've seen her rap
right.
and her comedy, she's very outspoken. The character that she played in Crazy Rich Asians is kind of a softer version of the harder R stuff that she does on like YouTube and whatnot. Here she just that persona is the perfect armor that she's able to shed and really surprise you with a very dramatic performance. She's still funny, and she still finds ways of being funny, but she's so incredibly charismatic in her sadness, and that's what's so striking. You don't expect that from her, based off of what you know about her, which makes her such a great piece of casting, but also she's an incredible actress. She's really just nailing every beat of this. She has a wonderful scene where they actually have that conversation about westernized values versus American values and whether or not it's actually legal or not in the U.S. to actually not tell somebody that they're dying. And it's really a great scene. And I love every part of this movie. Every aspect of it is really strong.
Oh, I mean, A24.
Yeah, they always, every time.
It's hard for them to fail. Yeah, no, that's a very interesting... Because I always come at it from, I never really, this is going to sound weird, but when someone has cancer or whatever, I guess you automatically think about them, but it's always like, I always try to put myself in that scenario, and what I'd like to think what would happen is, there's nothing you can really do about anything until you're there and dealing with it in the moment.
Yeah.
You can dread it all you want, you can think about it, but you would have to... The hardest part would be dealing with everybody else who knows about it and doesn't know how to react around you, and now there's just this cloud that follows you around, and it's the crowd, and then their response to it, which I don't know if that's part of what this movie is. I think a little bit with Awkwafina for sure.
Yeah, no, the whole movie really carries that tension with it, and they confront the issue directly, and that's really... they're not skirting the issue at all. Like when Nene is not on screen, they're talking about this and they're having these types of conversations. And some of them are quite funny, some of them are quite sad. And she really finds the perfect tone to deal with this, to keep you from being like weighted down by it. Weirdly enough, I actually was able to draw a connection between this movie and Midsummer. Really? Interestingly enough, because there's a conversation that she has with her uncle about instead of having all of the burden on her, you tell her that she's dying and all the burden is on her, we as the family are going to carry the burden of knowing what's happening to her. And it reminded me of the death scene, the suicide scene in Midsummer, where these people are committing suicide specifically on behalf of everybody else so that they're not a burden to everybody else. This is they're doing their duty. And the ability to rationalize in that rather extraordinary way reminded me of Midsummer and that very complicated rationale used there. That's
very interesting. I mean, the whole conversation, obviously we're not going to spend the whole podcast talking about what's right and wrong. I mean, I think both sides have their things that matter. I mean, I think here I am doing it. But if there's something you can do about it to heal yourself, then obviously knowing would be great. But if not, I mean, I can definitely see both sides. It's just I don't know. Human mind's weird, and it's, I suppose, a decent study, like you said, could be done about it to really say which is better or what scenario it works and what doesn't. But regardless, it sounds like a phenomenal movie, and part of me was like, hey, it's PG, let's take the kids to this one. But I wasn't going to win that at all.
Yeah. It's entirely subtitled. Almost entirely subtitled.
But kids can read. Get them going early.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event for the linear, legitimate, and universally recognized undisputed classic.
All right, our undisputed classic is a silent 1922 documentary about witches, hawks, and...
This should have been right up my alley, right? I mean, highly pretentious foreign documentary from the 1920s. I should have absolutely been all about this, right?
It's supposed to be 76 minutes long.
Yeah, that was a lie.
At least in the version I found it was. I did turn it off after 76 minutes.
Did better than me.
Well, I mean, I read the Wikipedia, and literally the Wikipedia summary of it ended right when the 76... It seemed like they had added scenes in it. I'm like, I don't know when they did this, but I got...
It is a Criterion Collection thing, so maybe. I don't know.
That said, I liked it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of things going on that I brought to this. One, Midsummer is still not that far removed. But I mean... that, and I kind of liked the look of it. I was just kind of shocked with how good it looked for 1922. I mean, there's nudity in it, which is weird. I didn't think they did that back then. And then, you got the immigration thing going on, and in this country, and you're sitting here, you're looking at guys on a big building, deciding who's going where, and not really knowing what they're doing. They're doing it from up high and saying this person's going back to this country. They're not, they're not American. They weren't born here. They're not a citizen. But they're not there in the moment doing it. And I kind of felt that way with these priests and deciding who was a witch and who wasn't. And, now they're, I was really bringing that to this movie, and it just kind of made it more interesting to me. Because this was real. It's not like there wasn't witch trials and people didn't think witches existed. Hell, I just told you about people in work with the Ouija board. Yeah. So this, this definitely happened. So I just found it interesting. And this movie does kind of address why it happened. It's just that it's from 1922. But I don't know.
I mean, it's still the idea of witchcraft or witches and witch trials. I mean, there are parallels to modern culture here, very easy ones. Like try being trans in this day and age. Yeah. I mean, that's got to feel like constantly being. They call it in the trans community. They call it being clocked and worried about being clocked. If somebody's going to realize that I'm not a man or I'm not a woman. That's constantly being on trial, constantly being judged by someone, and that's very similar.
Yeah, and there's different levels. That has its level. Being trans, or even being a different race, or being homosexual, or whatever. There's always, no matter how much we're advancing, there's still that still exists. And then, I mean, like with this immigration thing, I was throwing on this movie. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. Like this was right when that Iraq thing was happening, and then the video, or at least I was reading the article where that guy went back to Iraq and passed away right as soon as he got there. Then that little girl crying, that video where her begging for her dad to come back, all that had just come out, at least when I was reading, and it just really fit with what the movie was going on, because these women weren't doing anything wrong. They just happened to look weird, and so they must, in this, someone got sick over here, there must be a witch. Okay, you're a witch, or going to torture you till you confess you're a witch, and then you're going to start throwing other people under the bus and make them, so it just, and you got these 4 white guys who are monks, basically, and I don't know, I just really brought a lot of that to this movie, and it made it interesting. It's just, I only had so much time, so after our 70s, and it really, after a while, it's just like, okay, you're just retelling this. Every act was kind of a retelling of the previous act, and I mean, what are you going to do? It's 1922.
What are you going to do? I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Twice trying to watch this movie.
Which you can't really do because you got to read it.
Yeah, you can't.
It's a silent film.
Yeah.
Music was great. Classic Beethoven and whatnot, I think, was in it. But
I think that's part of the problem for me, is it was just, this is really good music.
But I thought the cover was pretty cool, and I liked the satanic imagery and all that stuff. But yeah, the parallels to today it's really sad that they exist.
Yeah.
1989, 2 movies came out. We were hoping we'd bring Josh back with one, but he went and watched it for the podcast, and he goes, you know what? My review is just meh. And so I really couldn't add anything for being on the show. So he's going to keep, save it for when he finally does come back again. That was The Abyss, directed by James Cameron.
Yeah, that's about right. Whatever.
I remember as a kid, like, everybody talked about this movie, and I don't know if it's because it was the first time it was kind of a real movie that we were old enough to, I don't really know. I never really cared for it. I didn't hate it, but it didn't do anything for me. But I mean, it got talked about on level with other Cameron movies. It just, as time moved on, the Terminator kept staying there, and Aliens kept staying there, and The Abyss just kind of fell off. So I don't know. I
mean, the effects are great. Sure. The face and the water monster thing. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. That's cool. I don't care about these characters all that much. It's pretty much a stock thing, and I think it was at the time too, where you've got the ex-husband and his wife, and they're gonna reconnect in a dangerous situation. Like, we've seen that a few times over the years. This is not a new scenario, even if it is Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. Yeah, this is not particularly memorable. You know what I found fascinating is that for a big budget blockbuster movie, Roger Ebert didn't review this movie.
Really?
Yeah, there's no Roger Ebert review of this, which I found fascinating.
Weird what he does and doesn't review sometimes. When I want to go back and see what his opinion was, I'm like, really?
I didn't check if he reviewed the other movie that we're talking about this week. That would be kind of interesting to know.
No way he did.
He's like, let's see, The Abyss, Freddy Krueger, The Abyss. I'll go see Freddy Krueger. Yeah,
The Dream Child, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, I don't know. Or is it 5? I don't even remember.
What is it? Yeah, who cares? This has got a scene that features my sister's biggest pet peeve in the world, and it's such a stupid small thing. So I constantly bring it up to her just to drive her nuts. There's a scene where a guy walks into a restaurant and he buys a pack of gum, he's going to buy a pack of gum, and he takes it and doesn't pay for it. Just drives her crazy. It's like when people on TV walk through a door, but they leave the door open behind them. Just right. One of those little stupid things.
They pay for it, they never grab it. I hate when they walk into your room and I'll have a cup of coffee, and then they're not there long enough to drink the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. What the hell? Or they've got an entire meal sitting there, but dinner's over.
Right. You never see him eating on screen because if
you're an actor and if you've ever eaten something on screen, you've got to do that 50 times. You're like, fuck this, I'm never eating again.
They have to keep refilling the plate because what shot are they going to use?
Yeah.
No, it reminds me of Halloween 2, the Rob Zombie one, where is it Brad Dourif? Is that the actor that played Chucky and Billy Bibbit?
Yeah.
He just holds this piece of pizza the entire scene and never puts it in his mouth. And it's amazing. And then you got the two girls that are teenagers eating, and they just keep shoving shit in their face.
Gosh.
And the commentary track made it even better. Ever since that, I've noticed it every time I've watched a movie when someone's eating or not eating. And it's pretty evident when they're what they're doing. And now that you've heard me say that, you'll probably notice it too, if you didn't already.
There's nothing particularly special about Dream Child. It's
which was the one when Johnny Depp came back? Is that the one before this, or
no idea? This is probably one of the nadir, like where you're getting into the really sad, for-profit Freddy. Like this is the corporate Freddy. Like let's try and get the profits again. Let's chase after that well-known property again, and see if we can still squeeze a couple more dollars out of him. But make sure we don't put any quality or any effort into it.
Yeah, at this point, I know they were working their way towards it, but he just is a full-blown comedian now as he's killing people. And, I mean, it works when you're probably a teenager, I guess. I was too young. By the time I finally did see these movies, there was only two I really liked. The first one and the New Nightmare, both Wes Craven ones. Otherwise, I get the character. I get why it's funny. I was either too old for it or too young for it. I never was the right age.
It's the it's the inverse of that classic the Batman line. Like you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It's the
exact opposite.
He's become the hero.
Yeah, and then
they got the wrong message. They got the wrong message from the success of the first movie. Is that people want to see Freddy? That's why they're here. No,
I mean that's why they made money. I mean they're not wrong,
right?
But it's like you said, they're not trying to be good anymore.
Yeah, it's not that we want to see Freddy murder people. It's that we want to see good people avoid being murdered. I think that's always been the best way to do a horror movie. Not the only way, but certainly if you're going to do a slasher film, I'm not here to like all the fucking 2000s, 90s and 2000s, like Friday the 13th movies and movies like that. They would create the most obnoxious, hateable human characters in the world. Specifically, so you're to the point where you're rooting for Jason to take their head off, and I hate that approach. And Freddy did it too with the group, the character groups that he was getting in the later films. They were creating these obnoxious caricatures, or really not even creating characters at all. Just they were creating cannon fodder that could be taken apart in a way that would allow Freddy to make a quip. And I hate that approach.
And especially when you throw in the simple fact that it's for profit and nothing more.
Yeah.
I do think there's an artistic way to at least attempt it. Whether it works, it's going to be your cup of tea or it's not. But they're not even trying. I mean, especially by the time Jason went to space. I mean, it was... I don't know.
I mean, as much as success made the Saw movies possible, every one of the Saw movies is following a very, very particular thread and trying to weave a story that has characters who are going through something that is compelling. Whether that actor or that character was compelling on their own, the thing that they were going through, part of a larger metaphor for what the story was actually about.
Well, even Eli Roth was at least trying that. He didn't necessarily was successful with it, but at least his attempt was to tell a good story that was terrifying. This is full blown just, hey, watch him kill people. Let's see. I mean, even the DVDs, there was links to the kills. You'd skip the whole quote unquote story. So I was never a big. I guess I liked it before I saw it. As a kid, I wanted to be Jason or Freddy for Halloween, having never seen any of them. And then when I finally did watch them, I was just kind of like, I'm trying to like it, and it's just not for me. That is our show. Next week, Angry Birds 2. 47 meters down. Where'd You Go, Bernadette? At least that looks a little better than the other two. And then Good Boys. I'm looking forward to Good Boys a lot.
Yeah, I like the trailer for that one. I like the cast. I like Seth Rogen's involvement.
And then Michael from Galesburg is coming back. I don't know how to call him. That's the Ivy Envy name for him. Michael Carlson's coming back to be on the show, and he suggested Bad News Bears as our classic, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while. Kevin Smith and Chris Jericho actually did a watch-along.
Oh, yeah?
Between their two podcasts. The first half was on Jericho's, the second half was on Kevin Smith's. And it was like, I haven't seen the movie in so long, and I think this is as good a week as ever to bring it back to the show, and I'm excited about that. Also turning 30 is Casualties of War, Let It Ride, Rude Awakening, Cheetah, Eddie and the Cruisers 2, A Chorus of Disapproval, and Uncle Buck. Which is why Michael's really coming back. He's a big Uncle Buck fan, is from what I understand. I've seen it once. I remember liking it at the time, but
that's a lot of 89 movies. Wow.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we're not gonna talk about all of them. We'll just mention most of them.
Sure.
For whatever reason, Cheetah's sticking out of my head as something that I don't know why. I feel like my brother liked it.
Really?
I don't know, but that name just sounded like it was some sort of kids' animal movie that maybe we never saw. We just had the poster. I don't know.
Interesting. I don't recognize it at all. Watch our Facebook page for this week, because I'm going to post, hopefully be able to post an interview I do with Rachel Bloom, who's one of the voices of the Angry Birds 2, and of course best known for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Yeah,
that'll be I'll be looking forward to that, and if we think of any good questions to throw out there, we'll do that as well, because that was kind of fun to read. Before I let you go, I want to thank our Patreon supporters at the key group level, Charlie Messing and Jason Bryant. At the character actor level, Josh and Beth Paul, Cousin Jeff and Christina Cato. At the special effects level, Corey Finneran and Sarah Morrell. And the movie star, Dave Sievers. If you want to be a Patreon supporter, head over to ihatecritics.net/Patreon to help support the podcast. It's the best way to do so. There's also a PayPal link if you'd rather just make a one-time donation. And then there's our merchandise tab that's at ihatecritics.net if you want to get some podcast merch. Tell your friends about the show. Share the show. Subscribe wherever you listen to it. Apple Podcasts, Alexa, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Rate and review the show. It does help. It does matter. It gets us noticed. And that's it. We'll see you next week. You want to play a little flick chart? You got to get going.
I'm good.
All right. I remember one time Corey Finneran said, every time you ask if they want to play flick chart, they always say yes. Why do you ask? So I stopped asking.
It's common courtesy.
I only ask when it's like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm pretty sure you got to work at like 4 in the morning. Silver Linings Playbook, Shrek.
Silver Linings Playbook.
I love that movie.
Yeah, me too.
The Mask of Zorro, Corpse Bride.
Corpse Bride.
Sure.
Wait, you got George? Make sure George is
I'm more or less going against the Mask of Zorro. Not that I dislike it, but I mean, I not good enough to pick. Argo, Evil Dead 2.
Ooh, that is tough. That is tough. I love Argo, but it's going to be Evil Dead 2. That's the more memorable experience for me.
Yeah, Argo is already, like, I remember that was the first Academy Award winner when we started the podcast, and that was my favorite movie up until I finally got around to Silver Linings Playbook, and I'm like, no, that's a better movie, in my opinion. Battle, Los Angeles, Dude, Where's My Car?
Oof, God, that is brutal. Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah, I agree. Oh, this is not fair. Zach and Mary make a porno, My Cousin Vinny. It's My Cousin Vinny for me.
It's Zach and Mary for me.
That may be the first time I've gone against Kevin Smith. But I mean,
My Cousin Vinny's a fine movie, but I love Zach and Mary.
I've seen that
far
movie.
More than I love, far more than I should probably.
All right, George. Let's see what you got to say. It's just Zach and Mary.
Nice.
And Kevin Smith's never going to lose again. That's not fair. Citizen Kane Clerks. No, I'm kidding. 1 hour photo, Beetlejuice.
1 hour photo for me.
I agree. Even though I think Beetlejuice is still probably more memorable, that was a movie.
1 hour photo is one that people need to look back on.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now, we're 5 years now away from when Robin Williams took his own life.
Van Wilder, Mission Impossible 3.
No, it's Mission Impossible 3.
Van Wilder. I love Van Wilder. God damn it.
Oh, George. What are you doing to us, George?
Where did he go?
Heads.
Van Wilder. 8mm Magnolia.
Magnolia.
I know it's better, but I like 8mm better. Hold on a second while I go get George. Where did he go?
He's right under your foot. Nope. Oh, wait, where did he go? He was there for a second.
Fucking Ouija board.
Yes.
Magnolia.
Yes.
I didn't really want it to lose. I just don't like it. Oh, your favorite. I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, which I have a feeling has a lot to do with your hate for Adam Sandler and about Schmidt.
It's about Schmidt.
Is that the one that really puts it over the edge more so than anything else?
That one? No, it's actually it's probably Billy Madison, really. I hate Billy Madison with such a fiery passion. But there's also like what's the one where he plays the devil's son?
Little Nicky.
Yeah, the stupid voices. I mean, it's just, he might as well just be stabbing me in the ear.
Little Nicky is, I can't even defend that one.
Yeah, and the Waterboy does the same thing, and it's
Waterboy,
ice to my brain every time.
I get what you're saying, but at least that one's a little more watchable for others.
I think, honestly, Chuck and Larry is just lazy more than anything.
But they really focus, I mean, when you talk about the hateful part, they really play that gay fear thing that's, I guess, existed more back then, but it's just kind of not funny anymore. An American Tail, The Lion King.
Oof. Lion King, I guess. It's a little more memorable.
That's hard for me, because American Tail, I was like right at that right age, but The Lion King's probably better. But I still shed a tear every time I hear Somewhere Out There. And The Circle of Life does nothing for me.
Okay, yeah, I think it's hearing Peebo Bryson every time.
Oh, American Tail.
Hey, all right.
Red Dragon, The Prowler, 1981. I've never seen that.
Yeah, I don't know The Prowler.
Red Dragon or The Player?
The Player.
The Player. All day, every day.
Yeah, the Unspooled podcast with Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson. They were doing. They did a poll on their page about when they're done with it. They talk about what movies should stay on the AFI list and what movies should come off. And they just did Nashville, and they said that Nashville should not be on. Not Amy and Paul, but the fans of the show said that Nashville should not be on the AFI 100. And somebody suggested, well, we got to have something from Altman on there. What about The Player?
I love The Player.
The Player's really good, but I was disappointed because I think Nashville's incredible.
I understand. I get that argument. I think there's not. I don't know how much does the audience have to play a role in that as well. I don't know.
I mean, if you're talking about the AFI list, I mean, if you're asking the public whether or not there should be an Altman on the list, of course not. He was never. Nothing Robert Altman did was ever particularly successful or popular.
Yeah, I love The Player,
right.
But I think it's
an incredibly niche audience for
right.
Robert Altman. You've got to be in the fan cult to get to there.
Right.
Universally respected, I would say. Like, people hear the name Altman and they're like they understand that is venerated, but not many people taking the time to watch it.
That should be a Patreon podcast. We take the AFI list, start a little ranking thing, and see what we do with it.
Nice, I like that. We've already done so many of them, so
it'll be kind of fun. Strangers on a Train, something to talk about. 1951.
Something to talk about 19...
No. Strangers on a Train.
I was going to say, you're talking about the Julia Roberts movie? Is that what
That's something to talk about.
Yeah. Strangers on a Train, obviously.
Yeah, I don't have to even have seen that to know that one. The Fox and the Hound or The Terminal?
Oh, The Fox and the Hound, please. The Terminal is utterly brutal.
Kingpin, Tropic Thunder.
Oh, that is good. Wow. Because you're talking about movies with a very similar sense of humor. Oh, man, that is interesting. Damn, I don't know where I come down on that. I really like both of those movies a lot. Man, I think my brain is saying Kingpin.
And this isn't fair, but I didn't see Kingpin right away, and we may have been doing the podcast when I finally did.
Yeah.
But Tropic Thunder, like, I jumped on board right away. So it's Tropic Thunder for me, but I don't think it's fair. But we can flip it anyway. And Kingpin wins, which I think is probably the right move. Similar with Magnolia. I'm not going to fight.
You got good taste, George.
Romancing the Stone, Castaway.
Castaway.
Yeah, for the performance alone.
Yeah.
The movie itself, Night of the Living Dead, Chinatown.
Chinatown.
Agreed. On the Waterfront, Evolution.
On the waterfront. And I had to think about it for a second because Evolution's like the biggest guilty pleasure of all time for me. Like right there, it's Evolution and Coneheads are the most shameful parts of my DVD library. And the most watched.
I mean, we can let George vote.